evening, everyone. This is Congresswoman Ilhan Omar. We are so excited for you to join us for our Day of Action live event. It's been a really tremendous day where people across the country in Minnesota, in our district, have joined us in making phone calls, in hitting the doors, in donating, in lifting up the work that we have been doing on behalf of our constituents and our country. So first of all, I just want to thank every single person who participated in our Day of Action today. And I want to thank our tremendous lineup of leaders who are going to join us in a couple of minutes to talk about what's at stake in this election cycle. It's been the honor of my life to get the opportunity to represent Minnesota's 5th district in Congress, not only to represent the voices of those who have been left out and shut out of the political process, but also folks who have been fighting for transformative change. I believe we dream big and we fight hard. And we've had that opportunity in the last year and a half to not only be pace setters, but table shakers and visionary leaders. And so again, I just want to thank all of you for joining us and being part of our day. The activities are still happening, so you can go to ilhanomar.com and join our Day of Action and see what you can do, whether it is donating or making phone calls, as we are still doing that, or joining us for another activity in the coming days. Our election is August 11th, so we are technically 2 weeks away on Tuesday for election. And so first, I would like to welcome my soon-to-be colleague, Jamaal Bowman, who hails from New York. How are you, Jamaal?
I am well, Congresswoman. How are you?
I am doing great. I'm doing great. We're all so excited to welcome you to the squad. Ayanna Presley says the squad is big, and we're gaining brothers. So this is really exciting. How does it feel?
It feels good. It feels good. I feel so blessed, so fortunate to be in this position. I have to tell you directly, I would not be sitting here as a Democratic congressional elect in New York 16 if it weren't for you. If it weren't for your leadership, if it weren't for your vision, if it weren't for your passion. 2 years ago when you got elected, I was a middle school principal, and I made sure to point you out and the rest of the squad to all of my students, particularly the young girls, because I want them to see someone who looks like them, who is the hijab and everything else, not just running for office, but winning congressional seats. But it's not just about getting there and winning. It's about speaking truth to power and breaking through this glass ceiling of nonsense and oppression that continues to impact the majority of Americans, but mostly Black and brown. So I'm excited to be here, and I'm sitting here as a Democratic congressional elect because of you. I ran for office because of you. And there's so many in this district and across the country that are just excited about what's happening in our country. When you speak about dismantling systems of oppression, you scare the living daylights out of the establishment. And that's why they're doing everything in their power to pour money into your opponent to try to take you down, because you speak truth to power and you uplift those who have been ignored, who have been marginalized, who have been neglected for far too long. And I know that personally because the same thing happened to me in this race. The establishment tried to consolidate power around my opponent. They tried to pour in millions of dollars of advertisements, both on TV and other spaces, but none of it worked because guess what? We had the power of the people, and we met the people where they were. We knocked on their doors. We pulled them into the democratic process, and we made sure that their voices and their needs were centered in our fight. And I know that's what you're all about. I can't wait to get to Congress to work with you on everything that you're doing, but specifically your housing bill is brilliant. It's bold, it's urgent, it's what we need right now in this district. And throughout my campaign, I referenced Ilhan Omar's housing bill, investing $1 trillion over the next 10 years to build 12 million new affordable social housing units. Because to your point, we're the wealthiest nation on earth. We shouldn't have anyone homeless. We shouldn't have anyone living in poverty, particularly our children. So who you are, what you represent, your life story, it uplifts so many, including me. And I'm so excited to be here, so excited to join the squad. And I want to tell everyone out there listening, go to ilhanomar.com/donate. Contribute a couple of bucks to make sure Congresswoman Omar gets back to Washington to continue the great work that she's been doing. And the reason why they're coming at her so hard is because they are scared to death. She is going up against 400 years of institutional racism, and the status quo wants to maintain itself. But we are not going to let that happen, because the power of the people is always more powerful than profit, always more powerful than Wall Street, and always more powerful than the wealthy elite. ilhanomar.com/donate. If you can't donate a couple bucks, make some calls, send some text messages, knock on doors. If my wife would have allowed me to go to Minnesota, I would be there on the ground right now. But because of the coronavirus, she wouldn't let me go. But I wanted to be there. I wish I could be there. But you know what? We're going to work together for years to come, God willing. It's my honor and it's my blessing to be here with you, Congresswoman. Thank you so much.
Yeah, well, Jamaal, thank you for that sermon. I really appreciate that. I know that in the 116th Congress, there was a lot made about the fact that we were a new class of very diverse people, right? Of diverse race, of diverse gender, of diverse ethnicity. But the reality, I think, of the thing that has made the 116th different is that we are people who are of diverse perspective. And I always say, right, in a representative democracy, someone who grew up in a non-democratic country, who now has the opportunity to live and thrive in a democracy, thank God, and it's a representative democracy. I've always said it's important. Those who represent us must have fluency in the day-to-day struggles, right, of those they seek to represent. And every single thing that you have been talking about as you've campaigned really is centered from the perspective of you growing up, right, in these poor, disinvested neighborhoods. It's from the perspective of understanding what it means to be a principal in a school where children are showing up with so much trauma in their backpacks, what it means to live in an environment where the person you are seeing greeting you every single day as your principal looks like you, because majority of our children don't get that opportunity, right? And, you know, many have said this, but I attribute this to my sister. She says that you can't be what you can't see. And that representation that you provide to your students every morning when they get to see you, that you have provided, allows them to dream a little bigger, right? To imagine themselves in positions of influence, to see themselves as the folks who are going to deliver a solution to their communities. They see a pathway out of whatever their lived experience might be to that moment. And for me, I feel like the opportunities we have gotten in Congress has allowed so many other people to see that, right? To imagine themselves in the halls of power. I get a lot of compliments in the ways in which I question folks who come in front of the Foreign Affairs Committee. And I say I go in hard because I have been,
that's right,
subject to the policies that many of those people have implemented so many years, and the policies that they have defended so many years. And I've been one of those people who sits in front of the TV and is screaming, ask him this question, ask her that question. And now I get to have that opportunity as the only and first African-born to serve on that committee. And it is wow. Really those kind of opportunities, right? That doesn't exist, that has allowed us to ask the tough questions, to bring different voices and perspectives to the table, and scare those who have gotten used to talking about us and not with us.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Wow. The first African-born to serve on that committee. And when
In
you think
Congress.
about in Congress, in history, right? And when you think about 401 years ago, when we first landed on this continent, in this country, in chains, in bondage, as the physical property of another. It's taken 116, 116 Congresses for us to have the first African born. And to your point, yes, the representation matters. And as an educator, I knew I was so much more than just an educator to our kids. I was a father figure. I was a mentor. I was someone that they can lean on for so many of their needs, social and emotional and familial. So I would have conversations with families about losing their homes, about being food insecure, about dealing with mental illness and mental strife. So representation matters and it's so powerful. And that's why in this election, we were able to triple voter turnout, because the people in this district were so excited about a viable another option, so excited about a fresh voice and a fresh face and new ideas. And that's what you represent in Minnesota 5, a new vision for how Congress can function and what it represents. You represent political innovation and social justice and strength and honor. And I think your biggest strength, Congresswoman, if I may say so myself, is your humility. That humility, I think, carries the power that can be reflected in our communities that see themselves in you. So I just want to thank you for everything you do, everything you represent. I'm happy to be here. I can't wait to be there as your colleague. And once again, to everyone watching, ilhanomar.com/donate. Please help her out. Please support her. We got to get her back to Washington so we can continue this work. And again, if you can't donate a couple of bucks, knock doors, text message, make phone calls. Let's make this happen.
Well, thank you so much, Jamaal. And I look forward to working with you on our Homes for All bill.
Yes.
Look forward to calling you my colleague. And look forward to creating good trouble, as the late John Lewis said. Thank you so much for joining us. Have a great night.
All right.
Next, we have a former colleague of mine who I got the honor and the privilege to serve with in the Minnesota House, Representative Mike Freiberg. Representative Mike Freiberg represents few of the suburban cities that are part of the Minnesota 5th. And, he's someone that I served in leadership with when I was in the Minnesota House as a freshman. I remember, Mike, getting a phone call from you right after I got elected as you were trying to build support to run for assistant minority leader. And I remember asking you about it, and you saying, I mean, you should think about running for it too. And it was really a joy to get the opportunity to serve with you in leadership in my freshman term. How are you?
I'm doing great. How about you?
I'm doing wonderful. Yeah. How are things in the Minnesota House?
They're great. They're not the same since you left, but we have a bunch of great new leadership coming up too. It's a really exciting time to be there. This is going to be an exciting election in the Minnesota legislature. I really believe we're going to flip the Minnesota House and flip the Minnesota Senate and be able to pass some really progressive legislation, the type of stuff I know you would advocate for very strongly if you were still there. So. Do you want me just to talk, or do you have any questions, or what? How would you like to do this?
Do you have a favorable memory? I have few of some things we were able to do together, but curious if it aligns. I'll let you go first and put you on the spot.
Sure. I did have one. So it was kind of a tragic situation that led to it, but there was a measles outbreak, and it was primarily centered in the Somali American community in Minneapolis. And I'd worked on issues related to immunization before, but just given the nature of this particular outbreak, I know you were the logical person to work with on it. And, I didn't know what your health background really was or where you stood on the issue, but, it was great to see you. You immediately took leadership, advocated for a strong pro-science position. And I remember your work led to a fund being created to fund public health emergencies. And obviously now that we're in a time of a pandemic, I mean, nothing could be more important than that. So, I mean, that was kind of the thing that I thought about, just because I'd worked on that issue a lot. I don't know if that's the same as what you were thinking or not.
That was actually, I remember the town hall we did at the Brian Coyle Center that got a little interesting. And I remember, asking you, like, we should do something, and how do I maneuver trying to get these resources? And I remember the Republicans on the other side of the aisle fighting us to get this emergency resource to deal with this measles outbreak. And they kind of made it like it was a thing that was just happening in Cedar Riverside, which in reality, Cedar was the only community that didn't have a measles outbreak. But Somalis, even in their, in St. Cloud and in the counties that they represented, were the ones that were having the outbreak. But in the ways in which we are seeing right now with this public health crisis, where they can't really come up with solutions to address the urgent crisis that we are in. It was similar to that, where they were fighting us to get, what was it, $500,000 that we were trying to get to deal with that public health crisis that we were seeing, where people, young babies, children, were dying because of this measles outbreak. And with your support and ability to understand where we should house these funds and how to maneuver their shenanigans to be able to deliver, we were able to get that $500,000, and we were able to save lives. And I don't know if I've ever, thanked you for helping me with that, because the reality of being a first, right, and representing a marginalized community is that it's a blessing, right? You do get to be a voice and talk about their perspective, what their hopes and aspirations are, and bring their issues to the forefront. But you also have the misfortune of sometimes being the only voice, and others treating you as if you are the collective representative for every single person of that community, and them, the actual representatives, being neglectful in addressing their own constituents' needs. And we see that now with the Congressional Black Caucus, as this public health crisis with COVID-19 is ravaging the Black community. It's making it so that the other representatives, even Republicans who represent Black communities, aren't speaking to the issue in the urgent way it needs to, and sort of expect, right, the Black Caucus to lead in this effort. And you understood that burden shouldn't just rest with me. That was a burden that we should have all shared. And as representatives collectively, we should address this need that our communities have and save children. I mean, yeah.
Well, it's obviously a critical election. I mean, just for people on the call, Representative Omar is facing a torrent of corporate and right-wing donations to her opponent. These are people who contribute to Donald Trump. So as Mr. Bowman said, ilhanomar.com/donate. That's where people need to go. So I'm really proud to have you as my representative, and I think you represent me well, and I've already voted for you.
I think that's the other thing we should remind people, right? That voting is actually happening right now. They do get the opportunity to order their ballots. They can go to dfl.org, or they can go to ilhanomar.com and order their ballot. They can vote in the comfort of their own homes. But our local municipalities and county offices have satellite offices where people can go and vote in person if they choose to do so. And absentee voting is allowed to take place until the 4th of August. Yes, you can send it in until the 4th, right? A week before election. and they have that ability to do so. I know that the Minnesota eviction moratorium might be lifted. It's somehow causing a lot, it's causing a lot of anxiety for a lot of people, and we've started an eviction moratorium. And I know that a lot of you in the Minnesota House are working on pieces of legislation to help us avoid the mass displacement that we might see and the collapse of our housing infrastructure. Is there any updates or anything that you know of as of now that's taking place that would be helpful for people to know in this fight that we are both engaged in trying to make sure people are housed?
Yeah, no, I don't know about. I don't know that Governor Walz is planning to lift the moratorium. I certainly hope not. I mean, it's obviously a critically important thing. I know that's been a discussion at the federal level. We were hoping to have a really large investment in housing bonds as part of our bonding bill at the state level here. Unfortunately, we weren't able to get the supermajority needed for a bonding bill through the Minnesota House, so that didn't happen. We're probably going to come back for another special session in August, in mid-August, so hopefully we can do something around then. I know this is an issue you've been working on really hard, and Mr. Bowman mentioned that. I know I really appreciate your work fully funding Section 8 vouchers, working to pass a renter's bill of rights that includes just cause eviction protection and non-discrimination protections. I mean, it shouldn't matter if you're LGBTQ or undocumented or formerly incarcerated. Everybody, I think, should have a right to decent housing. And I know that's something you've been fighting for, which I really appreciate.
Yeah, I mean, as someone who deeply knows what it means to be displaced, what it means to have a proper roof over my head, and someone who really never imagined, right, as an immigrant coming to the United States and seeing people housing insecure or displaced or without a home. It's been really one of those issues that I've prioritized, as well as childhood hunger, because one, it doesn't fit into the reality that should exist in the United States, in one of the wealthiest nations in the world, and two, it doesn't really fit into what it means to live in a morally just society. And so for me, it's been really a top priority in addressing our housing crisis, and I really do appreciate many of the partners that I've found, whether it was my time at City Hall in Minneapolis or in the State House, and even now in Congress. And I know a lot of people say $1 trillion investment in housing is a pie in the sky dream, but as you probably know, raising the minimum wage to $15 an hour was a pie in the sky dream that we just passed last year in Congress. Things like closing the pay equity gap were a pie in the sky dream, and we passed that as well. Passing a sensible gun law was a pie in the sky dream, and we passed that in the 116th Congress. And so there are many policies that people will say they're pie in the sky, but if you have people who have the courage and the moral clarity to get it done, it eventually gets it done. And it's upon us as leaders to set the base, right? To say, this is the vision we need to have, this is what it would take, and this is what we need to do. So I really appreciate you for taking the time, and look forward to getting you reelected and us winning our election. Thank you so much, Mike, for joining us.
Thank you.
So now we have another Mike, Mr. Michael Moore. It's been really a tremendous honor of mine to meet you in person, to get to know you, and to build the kind of relationship that allows us to work on issues that are important to both of us as we move a progressive agenda for our nation. but to also have, your platform to uplift some of the issues that I care about and have been vocal on. And one of those is the need to address the climate crises that we have at the scale it needs to be addressed. Why has that issue been so important to you, Michael?
Well, it's really, we're talking about the survival of this planet and our species. If you were going to rate in order the things that would be the things we should be most concerned about, I think our basic survival would obviously be number one, and that's why it's so important. And it's why I was thinking about this as I was sitting here listening to your other guests. And what's so incredible about you, and what I know about you, and we've talked about these issues a lot, is that you're really a visionary. You see things before the need to deal with them happens. It's probably why you've had to have been that way your whole life, being an immigrant, being a refugee before that, always your father looking ahead, trying to figure out how are we going to make it? How are we going to survive? That's probably really ingrained in you by this point. And learning, as I did in this streaming, that you're the first person in our history to serve in Congress who was born in Africa. That's an amazing historic moment. So I have seen your first 2 years here as such an important, historic, iconic moment for us. And if I could just take a minute to talk about the visionary that is you, Ilhan Omar. This is why coming out of the pandemic, it will end. And when it does, we need you there. We need bold, courageous, progressive members of Congress that you've probably talked to people, so many people. This is the number one thing I get from whether it's fan mail or people I run into in the hallway or whatever. It's that I don't want to go back to the old normal. People keep saying that. We've learned so much about ourselves in these 4 or 5 months, and we've learned so much about how we want to live. You need to be there in Congress to help us do that. And I mean, just take, for example, Medicare for All, which you've been a big proponent of. I have not had that argument with anybody in the last few months. Everybody gets it now. The healthcare system was crumbled before our very eyes. Mm-hmm. We were not ready. Mm-hmm. We were not ready. We're in complete lack of leadership. Hundreds and thousands continue to die that shouldn't die. Sadly, your father was one of those, and my heart goes out to you again for that. But just listening to what the state representative, is it Freiberg? Freiberg. I knew it was an old rock song. I thought it was Freiberg.
This is you asking the immigrant to say this name.
Yes, I know.
Classic. Well, I love it.
Oh, please. Immigrants know more. They can tell you more about our history, our language. No, but anyway, so Mike, the state rep, told us this story that I didn't know until right now, that you, the visionary, years ago, when you were in the State House in Minnesota, you thought, we should have a fund in case there was ever like some kind of medical or health emergency. You thought of that long before any of us would have ever thought, well, what do we need that for? We've got the best medical care system in the world. You thought of that in Minnesota. You pushed for that in Minnesota. This is why I'm saying the importance of you in Congress, that we need to, you will have no fight, I think, with the majority of Americans now that believe all of us should have universal health care that's guaranteed. Done and done. Make that happen next Congress. That's why you've got to be there. The majority of us, let's just say this, every single parent for the last 4 months has had to be a teacher.
I have 3 children, so I
You know what I'm saying? Everybody's like, and I don't mean just
like too. So we get it.
I mean, I couldn't do my daughter's 5th grade math.
Yeah.
I mean, that was my cutoff. And so the fact that we've all learned now how important teachers are, how important our education system is, how our children are now, when they do go back to school, are going to be behind. There's all of them collectively are going to be behind. And making education such a priority in this next Congress, and not half measures, not compromise, not any of this. We need people like you that are fighting for this. We had a Republican governor, a few months ago. There was a pandemic in the prison system, which is across the country. Very awful thing going on. And this Republican governor stood in front of the microphone on the day he announced that he was letting thousands of inmates out that were not a threat to society. And he said these words, we're not really letting out anybody who did anything serious. They didn't do anything serious? What are they doing in prison?
Why are they there?
Why are they there? Why are we paying for it? Couldn't we do this better?
I think, Michael, the one thing that oftentimes people don't create a connection, right, with is that we have a criminal justice system that doesn't really have any restorative justice practices as part of it. And we don't really recognize the loss to society, whether it is economically and just the investment that person could possibly make, that we lose once we incarcerate someone. In Minnesota, and it varies by state. In Minnesota, it's something like $34,000 a year to house an inmate in one of our prisons. So that's 30, and when we talk about, whether we're giving resources to our schools or, resources to house someone, resources to rehabilitate people, right? We think it's too much money, but people are willing to pay $35,000. In some states, it's 45 or 60
or more, yeah,
to house an inmate for a year, waiting for trial, right? Like they have not even been convicted. And people don't really think about the ways in which we have so many things broken in our society, where we don't question where that 35,000 to 60,000 goes, right? In having someone sit in a prison cell that hasn't been convicted of a crime. They probably might walk out, right? As soon as their trial begins, or the case might get dropped, or whatever that might be. But we now invested that much money in incarcerating them. We are also okay with providing full healthcare coverage to people when they are incarcerated. We are okay in providing education to them when they're incarcerated. And then when you say, without them being incarcerated in our communities, let's pay for their sobriety, right? Let's pay for their education. Let's pay to have a federal jobs guarantee where this person can work. Let's pay to house them and put wraparound services so they can remain housed, right? Let's pay for their mental health care. None of those things are ever met with an acceptance of like, sure, that makes sense. That's an investment as a community member, as a taxpayer that I'm willing to make because this person is going to contribute to our society after they get this help.
Right.
But we are willing to make an investment to incarcerate them for a year, for 2, for 3, even though we know they might not be a threat to our society. And so just the psyche, right? The psychological ways in which we think about what is an actual investment that is proper, that is helpful, that is worthy in our society compared to the things that we deem unworthy is so lopsided that sometimes it makes you go insane when you're a policymaker talking about communities that have constantly been disinvested in, that have faced the social and economic neglect. And it's exhausting at times to have a conversation with people who think it is okay for them to nitpick the $12,000, $16,000 a year we pay to educate our children,
Right.
but not nitpick the 30,000, 60,000 that we might pay to incarcerate them because we failed to educate them and give them the proper support when they were younger, which is.
It's crazy. And again, it's your vision of understanding why and how we could do this differently. And we need to lay the groundwork for that now during the pandemic. Don't wait till when the pandemic is over. We need to get people involved in this. And I want to say, just before I go here, that you are our member of Congress from the great city of Minneapolis. Minneapolis, 2020. You are the representative of what is essentially the epicenter of what I believe has been and will be a beautiful democratic uprising of people who are saying enough. We don't want to live like this anymore. We don't want to be like this with each other anymore. You are the representative of that moment in that city. It's so important that people, I'm simulcasting this right now on all my social media and Twitter and Facebook and I've got, 9 million social media followers. And I've asked them all to tune into this because I want them all to donate $1 or $2 to you. Also, here's the great thing about Representative Omar. She is opposed to us having to do this kind of fundraising because the other people that are running against her are fundraising from rich people, from the corporate-backed candidates, the establishment candidates. And so we all have to throw in our whatever we can. But I ask everybody who's watching this on my simulcast to give $1 or $2 to Ilhan Omar. That's ILHAN Omar, OMAR.com/donate. It's that simple. You can catch it on my Facebook or Twitter if you didn't catch that. But I want people to donate to you. I want you to stay in Congress, and I want your vision to take us out of this pandemic. We need you. We need 10 of you. We need 100 of you. You had on, you kicked us off today with a wonderful person who's going to be a comrade of yours in Congress. Yeah. So the more of this, and we will have the things that everybody's saying we need right now. We need a guaranteed wage. We need a raise in the minimum wage. We need all these things that you have fought for. So thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Really,
I'm honored to be part of this, and I encourage everybody to support you. You are an historic individual for the United States of America. God bless you. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Michael. And one of those rising young stars in Minnesota, soon City Council member Cedric Frazier is soon to be representative in the Minnesota House. And I am really just excited and feel jealous a little bit that Mike will get the opportunity to have you as a colleague, and I don't. Welcome. How are you, Cedric?
I'm doing well, and thank you for the introduction. And as long as we still got you in Congress to work with, I am happy with that. To speak to a couple of things that Michael mentioned and you touched on, how do we have this cognitive dissonance where we're okay with paying, tens of thousands of dollars, up to $50,000 a year to incarcerate folks, but we're not okay with paying that money to put it back into community to keep people okay. And what I always think about is the war on drugs, right? I grew up in Chicago when there was the war on drugs, and it was prosecute, law and order, lock up people that were addicted to drugs. Now we have the opioid pandemic, and what is it? It's a public health crisis. We need to take care of those individuals. And what that tells me is that you prioritize based on systemic racism. The war on drugs, when you had poor Black and brown communities with the crack epidemic, they didn't prioritize that. They locked them up. With the opioid crisis, we're going to take care of those individuals. It's tearing up white towns, suburban towns, Main Street. We're going to take care of those folks and make sure that we get them the help they need. I wanted to touch on that quickly because a big part of my platform is criminal justice reform, and that's something that I always think about. So thanks for bringing it up. Congresswoman Omar, I just want to say when we went into this pandemic, you did one of the most critical things with the Meals Act.
Thank
I
you.
work in education right now, and I know, and you know, that when we have kids and the only meals that they get are during the school day, and when our schools shut down, it was absolutely critical to take care of them, and the Meals Act helped to do that. We had kids that were now not left without having those meals. I mean, there was pure anxiety at the end of the school year, during Christmas break, during spring breaks, during summer breaks, when kids know they may not be able to get a meal. And that is exactly the anxiety that was being felt by kids and parents going into the pandemic, when we had to go into stay-at-home orders, and the Meals Act helped to take care of that. So thank you for that work. And I know that you're working hard for this district. I've seen you show up when we couldn't get local officials to show up at the local level. When the DED was about to expire, you showed up for individuals that were covered by the DED. You showed up, you stood up, you spoke out for those people. And like I said, we couldn't get some local officials to stand up for these individuals that live in the community, that are residents in the community, and that are also workers in the community, that make things go in our community, that take care of some of our most vulnerable people in our community. But you showed up, you were there for us, you were there for them, and you spoke out. So thank you for doing that work. And lastly, what I'll say is, whenever you have a voice that speaks truth to power, people are often drawn to that. They can be drawn to it in a negative way, they can be drawn to it in a positive way. You are drawing a lot of people to that. You were speaking truth to power. You and the rest of your colleagues that came in when you all got elected, I said, look out. I said, now we have a generation that is going to speak to a lot of the things that folks like me want to see spoken to, and you're doing that. And whenever you have that, the system pushes back and they want to shut that voice down. What we're seeing now is a system pushing back to shut that voice down. And what I had to say to everybody, tell your friends, tell your cousins, tell your family members, support Ilhan Omar. Go to ilhanomar.com, donate, sign up to be a volunteer. We have to make sure we send her back. We have to make sure we keep her there. We have to make sure that this voice continues to be able to stand up, to speak out and be loud and shine. Because if we don't have that, it will go back to the status quo. And that is something that we cannot have.
Thank you so much. You referenced the DED, which is the deferred deportation for the Liberian community in Minnesota. And I remember I visited your city, New Hope, when the Trump administration was refusing to renew that, and it was 3 days to go. Yeah. And we went to a nursing home in your city to uplift the voices of the majority of the staff there who, if that didn't get renewed, were going to be deported back to Liberia. And Minnesota was going to have a shortage in workers in our healthcare infrastructure. So many of our elders who needed that support, so many people with disabilities who are being serviced by our Liberian brothers and sisters would have been without that. And I think just even broadly, right, these are community members. There's nothing temporary about their lives here in the United States. When you've been here 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, you've bought a home, you have you build a community at your job, at your church, you have established yourself, you've had children in the United States who are citizens. And to wait every single year for that authorization to renew is just, it was something that felt immoral for me. And to now have the opportunity for them to have a pathway to residency and citizenship just brings me so much joy. But there are so many others in our community who are also on programs like that don't have temporary lives. Right. You know, they're settled here, and we need to keep them here. So I thank you for uplifting that. And you know, you're a parent, I'm a mother of 3 children. We both grew up in communities where, you know, children are devastated by hunger, by food insecurity, by housing insecurity. We know how important it is to feed the bellies before you can feed the brain. We make excuses for adults in the ways they behave because they're hungry. And we don't do the same for our children. And so when we think about wraparound services, it's important to me to think about feeding our children, which is why we've introduced the Universal School Meals Act, which is why we fight to end school meals debt shaming, and which is why we've introduced the Meals Act, and are so proud that substantive bill passed to now feed 22 million children across our country who rely on getting that school meal because their families, their communities aren't able to provide that for them. And I really just appreciate you and look forward to the good trouble you'll make with my friend Mike in the State House. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
And so I think now we have my sister in service, Rashida Tlaib out of Michigan's 13th, rooted in community. Is that the hashtag, Rashida?
It's real. It's not just a hashtag. No, seriously. Don't mess around. It is real. It's rooted in community. I'm grounded. I got my ear to the ground. You know that.
Yeah, I mean, this is the thing, right? I think people oftentimes think of us as like these people who show up on their TV screens, who show up at, these press conferences talking about, these policies that need to get implemented that are going to have a positive impact on people's lives. But they forget that we've always been doing that. We've always been showing up for our communities. We are organizers. We're people who are rooted in our communities. We didn't get elected because we were Muslim. We didn't get elected so we could be the first female Palestinian sister, or we could be the first like African-born Somali. We got elected because we understand the needs of our communities, and we are going to choose to die on the hill of providing for our communities. How's it going?
We both started in the legislature.
Right.
I think that's when I first, heard your name, and I was in the Michigan legislature. But we haven't changed in how we approach public service. We come home. Even during the pandemic, I think the Mama Bear, by the way, Congresswoman Ilhan Omar nicknamed me the Mama Bear. But it's always very protective. I'm the eldest of 14, but let me tell you how strong this woman is, and she's incredibly strong, mashallah. One of the things that I don't know what was going on, it was yet another attack, but it was early in our congressional careers, right? And I was just so worried. I just never seen anything like it, Ilhan. And so I went up to you. Do you remember this? I went up to you and I was like, sis, like, what do you need me to do? This is awful. Like, and you're like, Rashida, I survived war. I can survive this. And I just didn't know what to say. I was like, what? Okay. I was like, all right. And I walked away a little tearful because I'm like, I just imagine you, this little girl. And I just think look at you out there fighting, speaking the truth. Like Maurice, he was talking real, like it's hard because people are celebrating, right? They're so celebratory about this. This is the most diverse class in the history of Congress. Many of us, though, did not be the first of anything. We were, it was almost like called, like for you is even with the unions and workers and organizing. And for me, it was like the environmental injustices in my community. But it's not about being the first or like Congress looking differently, which is important. And you know that. It's important for your daughters to see people that look like them in Congress. But it's also so much more important that we also talk differently and we feel differently with the pain and everything that's going on in our communities. But no, during the pandemic, I was not surprised to see you passing out food out there, doing your thing, like really making sure to take care of the residents. And this is a pandemic. This is a really difficult time for our residents.
Yeah.
But you're on the ground doing the work.
No, we were able to deliver 20 tons of food to our communities that have been devastated, not just because of the pandemic, but Minneapolis had an uprising that had destroyed many of the limited food sources that we had, and so to be able to feed people has been really important to us. And then you and Alex and Ayana helped us raise money for many of the nonprofit organizations that provide resources. We raised close to $400,000, and we have been able to really turn, just in the ways that you did, our district office into a rapid response center where we are triaging every single day many of the issues that our communities are dealing with, whether it is out of the economic struggle. You know, I remember hearing you telling a story of trying to find diapers for your
first week
for your constituents.
Yeah, and it was the organization in Inkster, and they called and they said, Rashida, like, we ran out of diapers, they couldn't find it, and then I said, well, what's the problem? And they said, no, we actually don't have money. Yeah. And so, yeah, we raised enough money within the week to get 6,000 diapers. I never thought that would even be an issue.
Right, because we did the same thing. We turned our campaign parking lot into a food distribution and essentials distribution, and the number one thing we kept running out of was diapers. You know, we got diapers, but we kept running out of diapers. And it's not only do people have the resources to be able to get them, but in Minneapolis, the other issue we had were, you know, do people have a place to go to get them, even if they have the resources, right? And so, you know, and understanding, I think, as mothers, as community members who really feel for a lot of the needs our communities have, it's been important to have that effort be deployed. And you know, as sad and depressing it gets some days, it also brings like a lot of joy to be in a position of influence, to be someone who has a network, who can utilize that network in order to deliver to their constituents when bills aren't moving forward, when Congress isn't acting as fast as we wanted, when our governors are struggling, in providing the urgent needs our communities have, to have that opportunity, to have the resources to be able to provide. I know you were talking about the thing I said to you about surviving war. You know, I tell people often when you know, as a child you were ducking bullets, it doesn't get that hard to duck words, right? So I mean, it can't be that frightening or piercing to deal with just stuff that people say. And the investment, I think, not only to malign us, but to beat us down, really is rooted in how effective our voice has been in advocating for change. You know, it's not just because we are new, right? It's not because we are loud. It's not because, you know, we as the squad are speaking to the heart of the issues that have persisted in our communities, but it's because it resonates with so many people, right? Our voices are touching so many people, and they're being impactful. Absolutely. People are saying, if they can talk about this just as freshmen, why, if you represented me for 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, you not been fighting for these things? And then it's also putting pressure on, like the corporations that have benefited from keeping our communities down. It's creating pressure on, you know, the war profiteers that have benefited from having people not speak about them or bring light to the issues with them. Or it's, you know, the attention we bring when we fight for environmental justice, whether it's fighting the fossil fuel industry or fighting other polluters, or talking about the asthma rates in our communities, or talking about lead and how that's destroying so many assets and opportunities for our communities.
We're not even just talking, we're voting in a way that says, oh, you're spending how much on Department of Defense? And you're only spending what, 200 billion? Like literally just almost like the smallest fraction possible. I think it's less than 200 billion just on health and human services. It is so hard. You're not
gonna get upset about voting for $740 billion for the Pentagon, but you're gonna get upset for, you know, wanting to give $1,200 stimulus check to our communities, or continue to pay $600 extra for unemployment benefits. Like,
but Ilhan, honestly, like, I want your residents and everybody to know this. Like, I mean, the way you talk is the way my grassroots organizations here in Detroit and in Wayne County communities talk. I mean, the things that we're saying are exactly what our residents taught us. Like they said, hey, Rashida, water is a human right. I was like, you're right. Let me go to Congress. And I said, water is a human right. They're like, well, hold on. Maybe we should talk to utility companies. And I'm like, I don't understand. Why are we talking to utility companies? There's 15 million Americans that don't have water. Why are we still talking about this? I mean, honestly, Ilhan, like it's mind-boggling sometimes, but it's also because we move with a sense of urgency that is so different, right? You know, we hear our residents, there's like, Rashida, we're tired of waiting. I know they say it to you. They're like, how long do we have to keep waiting for us to fund schools in a way that's, equitable? How do we, and you hear the pain of the fact of like many people decide not to even to vote or they do nothing. And everything is so symbolic versus strategic or, focused, action focused, and really showing people, the government should be about people first, period. But it's really just, it's hard because they're with us, but they see us they see us getting beat up. And I feel like people don't understand when they go after us on certain policy decisions that we make and they police us a certain way, they're silencing a whole fraction of this country that is saying the same exact thing about water, the environment. Even, you've been fighting for, the lunch program being safe. I mean, Congresswoman Shirley Chisholm, Ilhan, she walked in, they put her on ad committee, girl. Like, she's from Brooklyn, and they put her on ad committee, probably to suppress her. They're like, what are we going to do with this woman? Yeah. But she got on there. What did she say, Ilhan? She said, people, children can't learn if they're hungry. Right. She was absolutely right. Children can't learn if they're hungry. And then she launched, I mean, people thought it was impossible. She's like, no, we need a free lunch program in this country. And now our people, even that don't support us, are like, well, we can't get rid of the free lunch program. So it's just, we got to continue. We have the truth on our side and the people.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Rashida. And now we have someone who, for a long time has been singing this tune. And people have said, right, like, Senator, what are you talking about? These policies are not feasible. And I know he's been fighting for $15 minimum wage long before it was accepted. And in the 116th Congress, we were able to not only pass it out of committee, which I sit on at the Education and Labor Committee, but also we were able to pass it on the House floor. And I know everything else that he has been fighting for is now mainstream. The majority of Americans believe in it and understand it. And it is because of his commitment to trying to bring these issues to light and setting the pace that has allowed for people like myself and Rashida and Alex and Ayana to continue to talk about these issues. So Senator Bernie Sanders, are you there?
I am right here, and thank you very much for inviting me. Are you able to hear me okay?
Yes, I can hear you. What are your thoughts about the way the state of the progressive movement and how we have been able to change the conversation on what's possible?
Well, my thoughts are that taking on the entire political and economic establishment and the big money interests, we are making real progress. And what I want to say tonight to people in Ilhan's district and people around the country is there are many good members of Congress who will vote the right way. There are only, in my view, a handful of great members of Congress. People who have the guts to take on powerful special interests. We just heard from Rashida, who certainly won, and I think Jamaal was on earlier, and where that number is growing. And what makes Ilhan unique is her understanding that we're not just fighting for one issue here or one issue there. She understands that we are taking on an entire system, a system based on greed, based in many instances on corruption. And she understands the tie-in, the connection between people working starvation at starvation wages, kids unable to afford to go to college or leaving school deeply in debt. She understands the connection to the fact that we're the only major country on earth not to guarantee health care to all people as a human right. And she understands the connection to all of that and to the fact that climate change is an existential threat to the planet, and yet we continue to give massive amounts of subsidies to the fossil fuel industry. And she understands the need for immigration reform. She surely understands the need to end systemic racism in this country. But what makes Ilhan and a handful of others unique is they tie all of that together. And they have a vision for a very different America. And that is why I am not only so proud to endorse Ilhan, but proud to have worked with her for the last 2 years. And I know that I'm going to be working with her for the next many years to come. And what Ilhan at the end of the day understands, and Rashida understands, and Alexandria understands, and Mark Buchanan understands, that at the end of the day, it's not just what we do in Washington, as important as that is. It is the need to build a strong grassroots movement. And that's what we try to do every day. And as Ilhan has just said, we have come a long, long way in recent years, not only in electing great members of Congress like Ilhan and Rashida and Alexandria and others, but electing people at the district attorney level, electing people in the state legislatures all over this country, on school boards, on city councils, and giving support to those organizations fighting for racial justice, fighting against climate change, fighting for immigration reform. We're bringing all of that together. And there has never been a more important time, I believe, in the history of this country to bring all of that together than right now at this minute, because of the extraordinary crises facing this country and the fact that we have a president who is completely unprincipled, inept, and corrupt, and unable to begin to deal with these crises. Somebody who's got to be defeated in 100 days from now. So, Ilhan, it's just my pleasure and joy, not only to support you, but to continue to work with you on the important issues facing the working families of this country.
To work with you in introducing our universal school meals, in introducing college for all, whether introducing the free whether it is canceling student debt for 45 million Americans, or introducing the free college legislation, and then recently, as we introduced the End Polluter Welfare Act, it's just been really wonderful to have had the opportunity not only to dream big with you, but to be in this fight, in implementing policies that are going to create that transformative change our country needs. So thank you for leading the charge. Thank you for bringing us along. Thank you for inspiring us to even get in the ring in the first place. And thank you for putting up a fight so that we can have these conversations today. So thank you.
Well, thank you very much. And everybody who is listening, make sure that you do everything possible to see that Ilhan is not only reelected, but reelected big, big time with great numbers. Thank you all very much.
I just want to thank everyone for joining us. I know that City Council member Cedric Frazier and Representative Mike Freiberg are still with us. I don't know if you had parting words for the folks who have turned in and stayed a little longer with us.
I was deferring to Cedric if he wanted to go, but I guess I just want to reiterate the importance of this primary election for those people watching here in Minnesota. Ilhan's going to need resources to get out, so go to ilhanomar.com/donate. She's facing just a whole bunch of corporate and right-wing donations going to her opponent. she's done a great job fighting for the people, you know, both in Minneapolis and in the suburban parts of the 5th Congressional District that I represent. And I'm consider her a friend, and I'm honored to have her as my U.S. representative.
Yeah, just to echo what Representative Freiberg said, I think what you really have to do, the question you have to ask yourself, why are so many resources coming in? You've heard the great work that Congresswoman Omar has done in the short time that she's been there. You've heard the great work and the tough work that needs to continue to be done. And she is up for that challenge. She has been a voice for that. You have to ask yourself, why so many resources to remove someone that is doing such great work? So go out, ilhanomar.com, and make sure you support her.
Thank you, Cedric. Thank you all for joining us. Again, the primary is August 11th. Make sure you're ordering your ballot, that you are voting, whether it is absentee or in person, and make sure that you are talking to your friends and your neighbors in getting out the vote. Oftentimes people forget there's a primary, and oftentimes people forget that we have challengers who are working hard in not just defeating us, but silencing really the voice and the work that we have been able to do, and the ways in which we have shaped a new narrative about what it means to represent and be represented. You can go to ilhanomar.com and get involved in either text banking, phone banking, or door knocking. You can also contribute what you can. Our campaign is completely grassroots funded. Our average donations are $18. We don't take any corporate PAC money, and we don't take money from the fossil fuel industry. We don't take money from people who are not invested in the betterment of our communities. That can't be said for those who are challenging us. So I really do appreciate for continuing to stand with us and fighting alongside us. So have a great night and see you soon. Bye.